From a terrified reindeer standing as a lone sentry on a burning ship, to a legendary swordsman absorbing a lifetime of agony in a single breath, these are all 14 nothing happened moments in One Piece.
I got
1. Chopper Nothing Happened. During the Skypiea arc, the crew split up to explore the upper yard, leaving Chopper alone to guard the Going Merry. The silence of the sacrificial altar was broken when Shura, a priest of Enel, arrived on his giant bird, Fuza. Chopper was a doctor, not a frontline fighter, and he was paralyzed by the priest's mantra. Shura began systematically torching the ship, the only home the Straw Hats had. Despite being outclassed, Chopper refused to jump overboard. He took a brutal beating. His fur was singed by Fuza's fire breath, and he was eventually forced to use Gon Fall's emergency whistle, a moment of pure, raw desperation that crushed his pride as a pirate. When the Straw Hats returned to find the Merry charred and Chopper covered in bandages, they were horrified. Chopper, hiding his trembling hands and wiping away tears, simply told them nothing scary happened. He bore the trauma of his first real solo life or death battle in silence, so his friends wouldn't feel guilty for leaving him behind. 2. Chopper's Monster Point. In Enies lobby, the crew was cornered by the elite assassins of CP9. Chopper realized that his standard transformations weren't enough to protect his friends from the life return techniques of Kumadori. With no other choice, he reached for his final, forbidden option, the third Rumble Ball. He knew that eating it would make him lose his mind and potentially kill him from cellular collapse. He chose to die and become a mindless beast just to clear a path. As Monster Point, he didn't just win, he decimated the tower, scaring his own allies. When the transformation wore off, Chopper was left paralyzed, unable to move a single muscle, his body screaming from the damage. While the crew celebrated their escape on the Merry, Chopper lay in a heap, unable to join the joy, keeping the physical cost of his forbidden gamble a secret. 3. Sanji needed a light. While the main battle against Enel raged, Sanji performed a tactical suicide mission. He sneaked into the belly of the Arc Maxim to sabotage the gears, knowing that Enel's power was absolute. But the stakes shifted when Enel launched a lethal El Thor lightning strike at Nami and Usopp. Sanji kicked his crewmates to safety and took the full god-level voltage directly to the chest. We see him standing there, charred black and literally smoking. Despite his internal organs being scorched and his heart likely stopping for a second, he looked the god of Skypiea in the eye, lit a cigarette, and quipped, "Thanks, I needed a light." He collapsed immediately after, never letting the crew know the true agony of absorbing millions of volts to save them. 4. Robin's Enies lobby choice. When the Straw Hats reached Water 7, Robin suddenly disappeared, turning herself over to the world government. The crew thought she was betraying them, but the reality was a silent sacrifice. She had made a deal with CP9. She would go to her death at Enies lobby if they promised to let the Straw Hats leave the island safely. She walked toward the gates of justice, fully expecting to be executed, and even stood by while Luffy was branded a criminal for her sake. She took the emotional weight of being called a demon and a traitor just to ensure the crew's survival. She never intended for them to find out, planning to disappear into the darkness of the Bridge of Hesitation so they could keep sailing into the light. 5. Robin becomes a shield. At the Sunflower Field in Dressrosa, Luffy gave Robin one specific order: protect Rebecca. As the executive Diamante unleashed Death in Jambre, a rain of thousands of spiked iron balls, Robin didn't use her powers to run. She turned herself into human bubble wrap. She sprouted a massive flower umbrella and stood perfectly still, absorbing the impact of hundreds of jagged metal balls into her own back to ensure Rebecca wasn't scratched. When the rain stopped, she turned to the princess with a warm smile, reassuring her that everything was fine. It was only after she turned away that we saw the reality. Her back was completely shredded and soaked in blood. She never made a sound, ensuring the captain's promise was kept in total silence. 6. Franky versus Senor Pink in Dressrosa. Franky engaged in a hard-boiled duel with Senor Pink. This wasn't just a fight, it was a battle of pure endurance. They stood face to face, trading hundreds of blows without dodging, testing who had the stronger resolve. Franky took suplex after suplex into the concrete, his metal frame dented and his cooling systems failing. He didn't use his radical beam or gadgets. He took the punishment like a man to respect his opponent's pride. When the battle was over, Franky was a wreck, but he simply wiped the blood from his eyes and moved on to destroy the Smile Factory. He never complained about the brutal physical toll of that manly duel, treating his broken body like it was nothing. 7. Nami faces Kaido. During the raid on Onigashima, Nami was cornered by Ulti, who demanded that Nami say Luffy would never be the Pirate King. With her skull already cracked and facing a headbutt that would be a death sentence, Nami had an easy way out. She just had to lie. Through tears of terror, Nami couldn't bring herself to betray Luffy's dream. She looked death in the face and whispered, "Luffy will become the king of the pirates." She was willing to have her life extinguished for a statement of faith. When the war ended, Luffy had no idea that Nami had already stared down death and refused to flinch for his sake. 8. Luffy's climb. On Drum Island, with Nami dying of a lethal Kestia fever and Sanji unconscious from an avalanche, Luffy had to reach the peak of the 5,000-meter Drum Rockies. He climbed the vertical, frozen rock with his bare hands and feet in sub-zero temperatures. His skin peeled off against the ice and his fingers bled until they were raw, but he refused to drop his nakama. Every time he slipped, he dug his fingernails deeper into the frost. When he finally reached the summit, his first words weren't for himself, but a desperate plea to save his friends. He collapsed into a coma immediately after. Nami and Sanji woke up recovered, never knowing the vertical hell Luffy went through to get them to Dr. Kureha. 9. Shanks sacrifices his arm for Luffy. At the very beginning of the journey, a Sea King attacked a young Luffy in the middle of the ocean. Shanks appeared in an instant, pulling Luffy to safety, but at a massive cost. The monster tore Shanks' arm clean off. Luffy was inconsolable, sobbing into Shanks' chest, but the captain simply smiled and told him, "It's just an arm. I'm glad you're safe." He didn't blame Luffy, and he didn't act like he had lost anything important. He treated the loss of his sword arm, the arm he used to duel Mihawk, like a minor inconvenience, letting Luffy believe that the dream of the next generation was worth more than his own physical wholeness. 10. Kuma guards the Sunny. After scattering the Straw Hats at Sabaody to save them from Admiral Kizaru, Kuma made a final deal with Dr. Vegapunk. He allowed his consciousness to be completely erased, becoming a literal human weapon in exchange for one final command: protect the Straw Hats' ship until they returned. For 2 long years, the mindless machine that used to be Bartholomew Kuma stood as a silent sentinel. He took hits from every pirate and marine who tried to scrap the ship. When Franky returned, he found Kuma rusted, battered, and falling apart, but the Thousand Sunny was untouched. Luffy still doesn't know the full extent of the man who gave up his soul to guard their home. 11. Bon Clay walks back into hell for Luffy. In the depths of Impel Down, Bon Clay stayed behind to pose as Warden Magellan to open the gates of justice. It was the only way Luffy could reach Marineford to save Ace. Bon Clay knew that staying behind meant facing the real Magellan's lethal poison and a lifetime of torture or death. As the ship sailed away, Luffy called him on the Den Mushi, sobbing his thanks, but he never saw the massacre that followed. Bon Clay chose to walk back into hell so his friend could have a chance at a miracle. 12. Brook versus Big Mom. Brook went one-on-one with Big Mom during the Whole Cake Island raid, a suicide mission to steal the road Poneglyph rubbings. He faced a Yonko alone, even calling her young lady to her face, despite being trapped in a room with her homies Zeus and Prometheus. Though he was defeated and held captive as a pet, he achieved the impossible. He hid the rubbings inside his own skull. When the crew rescued him, he casually popped open his head and handed over the keys to the Pirate King's throne. He didn't brag about surviving a confrontation with an emperor, he just acted like he had performed a simple task. 13. Jinbe's Magma Shield. During the retreat from Marineford, Admiral Akainu aimed a Magma Fist at a catatonic Luffy. Jinbe placed his own body in the way, taking the molten punch directly through his chest. The wound was lethal, a gaping hole of charred flesh, but Jinbe's only focus was clutching Luffy and continuing to run. He ignored the searing heat of the magma just to keep Luffy breathing. Luffy, lost in grief for Ace, never realized that Jinbe had nearly died multiple times that day just to serve as his shield. 14. Zoro takes all of Luffy's pain, the moment that defined the phrase. After the battle at Thriller Bark, Kuma extracted all of Luffy's pain and fatigue into a massive red bubble of suffering. He warned Zoro that taking it would be certain death. Zoro stepped into that bubble anyway. The resulting shockwave decimated the island. When Sanji found Zoro standing in a crater of his own blood, his muscles torn and his skin shredded, he asked what happened. Zoro, barely clinging to life and standing through sheer force of will, uttered the most legendary line in history: "Nothing at all happened." To this day, Luffy has no idea his first mate died and came back just so he could wake up feeling refreshed.